I would even say that there's only one rule that you absolutely have to learn, and
Okay.
everything else is optional. And I would certainly make sure that you learn that early on. And so the only strict rule that I think there is in communication is that if they didn't get it, they didn't get it.
Hello, everyone. Chris G here with the Titan's Tale. Today we have a great guest all the way from Germany. We were just discussing I've been to Cologne, Germany twice in my life, and it's a beautiful place. But today we want to listen to Dr. Michael Gerhardt. He's going to tell us about how to communicate with our team, and maybe not our team, some other ways of communicating, maybe with our spouses too. So please help me welcome Michael Gerhardt, Dr. Michael Gerhardt.
Hi,
How are you
Chris.
doing?
Great to see you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good as well. I'm going to be intrigued by our conversation today. I know I'm was reading my notes and stuff, and excited to hear about that. But first, before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, yeah, let's keep that short because, well, all you probably need to know is that I help people and businesses find the right words so they can make a bigger impact. That's what I do. That's what
Yeah,
I've been doing for like 16 years, and that's what I write about in my blogs and books. Yeah, so
I know you
that's
are
the
an
shortest
author.
way to say.
Sure. How many books have you written? Written.
That depending on how you count. But well, the shortest number I can name is 2, which is the aha effect. On well, a better way to present, and the latest book is The Path to Strategic Impact. But there are a number of other kind of endeavors and smaller types of publications. And also a lesser known part of my life is that I run a secondary business with my wife, where we've published quite a number of quite well-known children's books here in Germany.
You teach people in your coaching how to communicate properly or better with others, and not necessarily talking down to them, but bringing it down to their level so they can understand.
So
Yeah.
one of the problems that some of my clients, that they try to find kind of the eloquent words, the fancy words, the language that sounds smart. But that sometimes kind of hides the actual message behind kind of that curtain of creativity, so to speak. And so what I try to do is that I try to let that curtain fall, and just challenge them on, so wait a second. So if we were just sitting in a bar together and we were having like a beer together, how would you explain it to me? What is it that you actually want to say? So what do you want to say here? And then they will often kind of fall back to much more simpler language, much more plain and simple language. And very often that leads them immediately to open up and feel much more passionate about the things that they say, because they're not so much concerned with finding those cool words, but much more concerned with telling a story that really makes sense for me, right? And so that is one thing that's very powerful. So don't try to shoot for the fancy language. Try to find the simple words that help me really see it. And that might be another tool that you can use, like the question. If you ask yourself the question, can you see that, or can my audience see that? So when I talk about how innovative we are, or how efficient our production process is, so what does that look like? So what does that mean? How can I see that the process is efficient? Can you describe me one thing that you do where I can see kind of in my mind that this is efficient. This is efficient because I know, well, how that looks like in my own company. So can you kind of make your language more visible and tangible by translating it from the abstract concepts into concrete things that you can do and that have like a tangible meaning in my own life?
Do you practice this at home?
Well, actually, I'm a very avid writer, so I write every day. I publish a daily blog since like 16 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And that that is something that I try to do, that I find words that make it easy for my readers or for my audience to really see what I see. And the same is true for my keynotes, but also, of course, when I talk with my kids about like we've had the elections in the United States, but we also have like political situations here, or there's the climate discussion, and all those abstract things where a lot of opinions are flying and a lot of like difficult to understand concepts are there. But I try to break that down for them in a way that they can actually make sense of it, and they can know. So what do they mean when they speak about that theory or that new law or that new discussion that we saw on the television or something like that?
I noticed that you play an instrument, and my sister-in-law plays piano. My nephew plays the guitar as well. And I'd always heard that music helps, I guess, develop the brain. And does it help communicate better?
I absolutely believe it does. So
Does it? You
first,
think it's just go ahead.
I think there's a couple of layers to that. First of all, other than language, so different to language, music often is a very emotional thing, right? Great music is music that you feel. And you know that something like grooves or strikes a chord literally is when it makes you feel something. And so I think that is a dimension that often gets overlooked in like business communication, where we often try to find better logic, better arguments, and try to reason more, persuade harder. When it would help to like take a step back and try to find, okay, getting people to agree with me or get the point is one thing, but can I also get them to like feel that it's right? Can I get deeper into their emotion? Can I make them say, well, yeah, that sounds about right, but it also feels right? And so I think that is something that music did for me, that, well, there is that layer of communication, of listening, of well, that well, it goes deeper than the brain and the rational arguments.
When you write your blog, do you write in a cadence, like a song or rhythm? The reason I ask, President Obama, whether you like it or not, he could really do he's very good at making speeches. And he would get in a rhythm, and that rhythm
Yeah.
would lead people along. I was wondering if you see that in communication or through your blogs or so forth.
That's a great question. So I would say that I don't force that, right? I
Mhm.
don't. So if I can't find that angle, I will just let the argument speak for itself, or the story speak for itself. But when I kind of see that angle, when I kind of see like, well, wait a second, we can make that like rhyme better or like flow better, and give it like even a kind of melody or a structure that almost feels like, well, it flows like a rhythm. Then I try to find ways to make that happen. And yeah, probably some of my posts might even feel like they could be song lyrics. But it's, well, as I said, it's not something that I try to do with
Intentional.
every piece,
Sure.
and that I would not force if it would like make things less clear on or hurt the understandability of the piece.
Okay. Let's say I'm a student of yours, and it's my first or second day or week, whatever it is. And what's the first concept I need to learn from you about conveying complex concepts? I mean, what do I need to do? I need to change my frame of mind, or do I need to think as far as you mentioned earlier, put yourself in a situation like having a beer? Are you teaching people how to relate to those other people you're talking to? Or,
Well, actually, I would even say that there's only one rule that you absolutely have to learn, and everything else is optional. And I would certainly make sure that you learn that early on. And so the only strict rule that I think there is in communication is that if they didn't get it, they didn't get it. So, and that's brutal, right? I mean, it's just no use in arguing that you meant it slightly differently, or that you mentioned it on slide 13, or that you've written it down on page 23 of your report. They didn't get that. They didn't get that. And it's not their fault, because let's just assume they tried and they really read that report with a focused mind, but they still missed it. And so I think everything else derives from that what I like to call rule number one in communication, is that once you really fully embrace that, you start to ask all the right questions. You immediately see that, well, it's not so much about what I want to say, it's much more about what they hear, and not so much about persuading them harder, but try to resonate with stronger with them. So listen before I talk, so that I can use their language and understand what where they are coming from first, before I start to elaborate my own thoughts. Yeah, so that's what I would teach you early on. If they didn't get it, they didn't get it. Just take ownership of that.
Sure. So here in the States, we have a game called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And we all chuckle at that. But in college, I remember on one of my classes about we need to write as if a fifth grader is reading it, or at a fifth grade level.
Mm-hmm.
And which is unfortunate, but I guess that's the average. Somebody did some math and said that's kind of what we need to do. My question is, should we start our conversations with a complete stranger? Should we assume they don't know anything and start at that fifth grade level, or should we kind of assess the situation and adjust our communication based on what we perceive?
I mean, yeah, if you don't know anything, well, or let's say it that way. If in doubt, make it simpler. So go for that simple language. But of course, if you know your audience, if you know the language that they use, if you know the jargon that they are familiar with, if you've had previous conversation, by all means make use of that. Treat them as smart people, and treat them as someone who's willing to figure things out. But just don't make it harder than necessary for them. So yeah,
Sure.
listen. I think the best approach is to listen first and talk second. To listen, to pay attention to what language they use, and then adapt yours to theirs, rather than force them up or down on your level.
That's a perfect answer, because I was talking to somebody the other day. We were talking about marketing, and we know you got to know your audience, and we are a bunch of entrepreneurs here. So we need to know our audience, and we need to know how audience speaks. And there's certain words mean the same thing, but my business coach would say, well, would your audience, and this would be contractors, does your contractor say that word? Like, well, no, they probably don't. And so we used a different word, and it's more likely they use that in their everyday language. So that's kind of what you're talking about as well. It's that you need to know who you're talking to. More likely, especially in marketing, you're going to know who you're talking to. If you have an idea or something, whether it be your team, your boss, your wife, or even an investor, you're going to have an idea of how to talk to them to some extent going in.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add, well, I couldn't agree more that, well, just just pay attention to them. So, and when you pay attention, it's much more likely that they will pay attention, that they will just pay it back.
Do you have well, it says new approach, but it's just is it something you come up with that's unique, or it's just a way of people communicating that's not done regularly?
Well, to be totally honest, I think that there's not much to learn about communication that we fundamentally don't know since like the times of Cicero, like 2000 years ago. So we're still humans, and our brains still work pretty much the same way than they did back then. It's just that, well, we sometimes forget those things. And when like a new technology or a new times hit us, then we kind of have to relearn those things all over again. And then, of course, that, well, our lives, our habits, our everyday just changes, and that it's useful to translate those concepts that we basically know since forever, but to translate them into our everyday, into today's world, so that we can make sense and apply them to like the jobs that didn't exist like 20 years ago, or the technology and the media that didn't exist like 20 years ago. The fundamentals are the same, but the way that we speak about them and the way that we translate them for the people who need to communicate, they of course change. And that's why perhaps this field of communication will be around for the foreseeable future.
Isn't there I wouldn't say a fear, but isn't there a chance of oversimplifying or making an assumption somebody knows what you're talking about? Like, my daughters love to text their dad, okay? And I sometimes write back, what in the hell are you talking about? Because I don't know. And it's some kind of slang or verbiage that they assume I should know, and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I assume there's some things out there that we get too comfortable in our communication. Can be just as bad as being too complicated, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, there's no guarantee. I actually love Miles Davis' quote, the famous jazz musician, who once said that if you understood everything I said, you'd be me. And so these things just happen, even with all the preparation in the world, even with our best intentions. We sometimes explain our newest idea that we're super enthusiastic about to our friend and take great care to use a metaphor or an anecdote that they can fully relate to. And they just respond with a blank stare. They just don't get a word of what we mean. It just doesn't make sense for them. And these things happen. But yeah, well, then I think back to what I said earlier, the listening doesn't stop when you start talking. The listening continues. Pay attention to their blank stares, to the way they raise their eyebrows, to the way they ask the questions, and then you adapt, and then you try to figure out. The point is not so much to be right from the start, but to get it right as you go, to get it right eventually.
A lot of your clients are what, CEOs, founders, top level people. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
What are their goals when they come to you? Communicate better with their people. They realize that they're not able to resonate with their staff. What's their kind of motive for coming to Dr. Gerhartz and having him help them communicate better?
So I'm fortunate enough to work with people who aren't in it for just like getting that next sale or getting that next career move. The people that I work with are predominantly people who kind of believe that what they do has the potential of making the world a little bit better, at least in their circle of influence, like a product that really improves something fundamentally for their clients, or an idea of how we can work together better in that company, or why that merger between those two companies really make sense, and there's really no reason to be afraid on either side, like the employees or the customers, and that this is just a great opportunity. However, they sometimes struggle to find the words to express that, because I mean, let's face it, we're all humans. We're all like under that strange phenomenon that's sometimes called the curse of knowledge, where the more you know about something, the harder it gets to speak about that in simple terms. Where, well, when you have that, when you've come up with that new strategy and you spent like weeks or even months with your leadership team, thinking hard about those things, going through all the analysis and coming up with those strategies, thinking through all the details, then it can be sometimes hard to break it down and find the words. But if you truly believe in those things, you'll understand that that's crucial, that the work is not done when we've created the strategy, but that it's done when the team puts it into action. And that includes finding words that helps the team understand. So wait a second, what is that strategy actually all about? And what does it mean for the choices I need to make when we set up that new project, when the customer calls, when we have to negotiate the deal with our partner, and so on and so forth. And so they care for making that happen, bridging that gap between what sounds great in the boardroom and what their teams need in order to put it into action.
Okay. Communication goes both ways, obviously, listening and speaking. And as we have teams, we want teams to come to us with ideas or concerns or whatever. How do we encourage our team members to come speak to us in a way that we can understand them?
I think one of the most powerful things that you can do for your team is to make asking the question, wait a second, what do you mean by that? The norm, in both directions, so that the team is allowed to ask you at any time without feeling kind of ashamed, or without feeling that, well, they might hurt your feelings or might challenge you or something like that. Just plainly ask, so wait a second, what does that actually mean? And so if the team is allowed to ask that, and you are allowed to ask it to the team without them being afraid that kind of you're skeptical about their idea, when all you wanted to do is figure out what it means so that you can actually make up your mind about it. So when you make asking that question, wait a second, what does it mean? The norm. Then that means that you'll turn speaking with clarity into a habit, that you stop kind of the reverse, where you are okay with that someone uses that strange language and everyone has to figure out, so what does he even mean by that? But you delegate that task to the one who's speaking, to find words that make sense for all of us. And the more rigorous you are with that approach, the likelier it will be that you kind of find that common language that makes communication and speaking about your ideas so much easier for everyone involved.
Well, that question also implies that you are listening to them. You're just not quite understanding what they're getting across. I mean, it's important for people to know you're listening, right? You don't want them to think that you're just letting it come one ear and out the other. So asking questions, that's a good answer as far as how to do that.
Yeah, and you're totally right. I mean, yeah, ask the question, then shut up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not asking the question because you know the answer. You're asking the question because, well, you want to find out, and you can only find out when you actually pay attention to their words, when you are present in that moment, and you're open to their ideas, and actually open to that they might have a different angle than you, and even open to the possibility that their angle actually makes more sense than yours.
100% there. When it comes to public speaking, we're about to wrap up. You're talking to all types of people, a group of people. So obviously, I think you had to know the group, right? And kind of get an idea for where they're at. Except that if they get it, they get it. They don't, they don't. But you want the majority to get it, right?
Mm-hmm. Perhaps. yeah, most of the time you'd want that. But that's not a given, right? Because there might
No.
be that person in the room that you know who's there, that you know is there, and that you need to somehow resonate with, because he will be crucial when you're negotiating with your investors. And that might be just everything that needs to happen in that keynote or in that speech that you're giving. But yeah, you're right, most of the time that's different. You show up because you feel like this is an important story to tell, and this is worth spreading, and I hope that as many people as possible see what I want them to see. And yeah, and that actually means to kind of dig deeper and ask, so what's the commonality here? I mean, even if they are different types of people and different people, what makes them come together in that room on that particular day? So where's the commonality here between all of them? What's the thing that all of them are familiar with? What are the stories and experiences that we all share? Because, well, we've all watched the same show, or we all share the hobby of sailing or golfing. And so can I find a translation that uses those commonalities? And then once you have that, and once you spark that curiosity and open their minds up for deeper thoughts, for kind of engaging more with what you have to say, then that's the time where you can dig deeper. And then they might be willing to follow you down that rabbit hole. First, make sure that, well, there is that curiosity, that you tap into something that's familiar to them.
If somebody wanted to reach out to you and get in contact you with either coaching or some of your books and so forth, how would they go about doing that?
They would just head over to my website at michaelgerhartz.com, Gerharz, michaelgerhartz.com, one word, and you'll find pointers to my blog, my podcast, my books, but also, of course, how to work with me and contact. But also feel free to just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to follow you along and, well, learn more about what you do.
Excellent. Well, it's certainly been a pleasure today, and I learned quite a bit actually. It's like you said, it's more of something we've known. It's just using it in a different way, or using it better, or maybe using it as intended to. So communication and simplifying it so everybody can follow along. Dr. Gerhartz, thank you very much. This is Chris G, and you can find us at titantale.com, where you can find Dr. Gerhartz and everybody else on our great guest list. And you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You guys have a great day. Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Bye-bye.